Welcome back to Dave Knows Comics for another How to Draw session. Today's episode is all about creating dynamic stances by using the X, Y, and Z axis. Now right here, look at this. Regular, flat, boring character standing directly in front of the camera and not posing at all. Now the problem with this is you don't remember the X, Y, and Z axes. Now what is that? Well, look at this. If we were creating a regular flat square, we just use that, the X and the Y. But if we want to create something a little more interesting, like let's say a cube, right here like this, then that Z-axis comes into play. Now this is how we take advantage of that third dimension. And remembering this, even when drawing figures and not drawing cubes, can be a big game changer in terms of your art when it comes to drawing. So, alright, with that out the way, let's remember the boring bathroom guy, and let's look right here at a little bit more of an interesting stance. Okay, so I'm going to gesture this real quick, just draw this out real fast just so you get the idea of what I'm talking about. And as I'm doing this, notice what I've done. I've changed everything. Torso, the limbs, the head, every part of this character now is not going to be the way it was in that past drawing, in that flat, boring, stick figure guy. Look at this. The one hand, one arm is straight down, bent a little bit. The other arm is going to be extended straight into the camera. One knee, he's bent on one knee, bent down. That's going to be coming closer towards us. And the other leg is sprawled all the way out, stuck all the way out. The head, slightly tilted. The torso, he's bent at the torso a little bit, bending down a little bit, hunched over. Now this is taking advantage of all of those dimensions. With the leg being sprawled out, this is parallel with the x-axis, but it's taking advantage by stretching out all over that. The y-axis, ducked down, hunched over, shrinking the character down, so that's moving them along the y-axis. And by having the limbs sticking closer towards the camera or bent a little bit, that is also taking advantage, or the head tilting too, is taking advantage of the z-axis. So you see how all the depth, you see how all of these things create a more interesting pose. The character's now posed a little more intriguingly because now they're all bent up and sprawled out, and they're taking advantage of all the X, Y, and Z's. And the more you can think to do that, the more action, the more dynamic style the character will have. And this is comic book, so there's going to be a lot of dynamic poses required here. Now, of course, you don't need to do these specific things or do things like this with every drawing. Sometimes a character is going to have a very flat stance. The character might have to stand pretty still or not in this crazy Spider-Man kind of way, and you might just want to tilt their head and do something more subtle. It's all about what you're trying to convey with the drawing, because things like stoicism are conveyed by having a very stationary, stern character stance, and things like Spider-Man with his agility and action, you're going to want to bend up his limbs a little bit. It's just think about running. Like if you're going to draw a character running, their limbs are going to be in different places. They're going to be bent up sometimes, they're going to be straight out other times, and that's how we understand action. And it's as simple as that. So the more you can think to do that, the more actiony the drawing will be. The more streamlined and simple the stances, the more like that regular boring stick figure guy it is, the more stagnant, the more still, the more calm the drawing is going to be. And it all depends on what you're going for. But since this episode is all about creating a dynamic pose, you should remember to do things like this as much as possible for more dynamic poses. And that's why we're drawing Spider-Man too, because, Spider-Man, agile guy that he is, he's going to be all over the place. Alright, so now that I'm finalizing the drawing, you get a better sense of what I'm looking like. And yeah, you can see how already this is a more intriguing drawing than that regular old stick figure guy. And so keep things like this in mind. This is just one thing that you should think about whenever you're drawing comic books and you're trying to draw poses. And don't fall in the trap that a lot of us fall into, because when we're all start drawing out when we're really young, when we're really small, you draw kind of like that, where you draw flat, stick figures, and they're just completely parallel. Their arms are straight down, their legs are straight down, they're looking directly in the camera, their head's not tilted at all, their body isn't turned at all, they're just as generic as you possibly can get. And, we all do that. I did that. So, yeah, that might be our natural default in a lot of ways to draw characters that look like that. But if you play with it, you can have so much more fun, and you can create such interesting characters and drawings that are really great to look at. So, once again, you don't have to use these exact tricks that I'm using. You don't have to do all of them all the time. It's just something to keep in mind. Bending the limbs, pointing the limbs closer or further away from the camera, tilting the head, tilting the torso, bending at the torso, tilting the torso forward, just keep those things in mind, and that's how you can create a more dynamic pose with your drawing. So I want you guys to try this and start thinking about it, and you'll be pleasantly surprised with what you can get done. Let me know how it works out for you down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm so glad that you did. And as always, Dave knows.